one other important aspect of how this vote ends up going in Georgia is going to be, there's a few little wild cards. One I want to talk about is what we've been talking about for a couple months now, which is the possibility that this narrative out there on the right that there's no point participating because the whole thing is rigged, or a stronger version of it, which Lynn Wood has been presenting, which is we're going to prove that it's rigged by everyone boycotting. So there's like it's probably not worth voting in. There's please don't vote. How significant is that gonna be? And we haven't had much polling really in any aspect of Georgia, but we do have a little bit now. So apparently, according to Survey USA, of those who are not voting in the US Senate runoffs, a disproportionate number are conservative. Of those who identify as very conservative, 55% say they're not voting in the runoff elections because the voting process is rigged. This compares to 0% of liberals and very liberals. Another 7% of very conservative voters say they are intentionally boycotting the runoffs. This compares to 0% of liberals and very liberals. It's just one poll. We'll see. How are people defining those things? How significant is this? I don't know, but it is at least some evidence that narrative, those combined narratives that are sort of feeding off of each other, might be having an influence on some people. And in a race that is likely to be very close, anything like this, in theory, could be enough to tip the balance.
Don't stop, come back. That's all I have to say to all the Republicans. Like, great. I mean, this is one of those things that I don't believe is happening. And there's two ways to interpret that statement. One, it's just a saying, like, I don't believe it, that's ridiculous. And the other one is I really don't believe that these voters are gonna stay home. Because as much as the world has become completely unhinged and jumped the shark in 2020, for me, already watching Joe Biden beat Donald Trump in Georgia has been one of those, I don't believe we're in the same timeline anymore moments. Like if I went to Atlanta, there would be like robots in the streets with laser hands. Like that's how weird it sounds to me. And all of this, once I believed that given how people voted for Republican incumbents and Joe Biden to maintain essentially a very close Republican lead in the Senate and losing seats for the Democrats in the House of Representatives, I still thought that in this runoff, the Republican incumbents would just sweep it by a lot. Mm-hmm. And if these numbers are true,
they still might. But
if these numbers are true, and I still don't know if they're asking like likely voters, but the big question mark block in all the polls from before, as far as I'm concerned, were intense MAGA supporters. And I just don't know if those intense MAGA those seem to be the same people who are the potentially disaffected group. And so if they don't show up, we go back to the polls being largely more accurate than they were before, than they were in the last one, you know?
Look, I am inclined to think again, like it's one thing to be like, oh, am I gonna vote? No, the whole thing's rigged, screw it. But then like on election day, I don't want those communist Chinese Dems in control of the Senate. So I still feel like most of them are gonna go. We'll see. Let me give you a little bit more results from the poll. Again, this is Survey USA. The full information is out there if you want it. 3 weeks ago, Warnock led Loeffler by 3 points among independents in Georgia. Today, he leads by 18. 3 weeks ago, he led by 29 points among moderates in Georgia. Today, he leads by 51 points. And there were a few other like things having to do with Kelly Loeffler, which seems to imply that she might, they've all been attacking each other. There's 4 candidates there. I feel like she has gotten the majority of the effect on her. Like, I don't think it's really hurting Perdue as much. The stuff with like Warnock, like they were referencing in that video, it was that 18 years ago, a church he was involved in ran a summer camp. And there was this really unfortunate and disgusting thing that happened where one of the kids who's now 30 wet the bed. And so a camp counselor like poured urine on him, like something disgusting like that. And Loeffler comes out and she's like, this is very distressing. It raises very worrying concerns about Warnock. But no, it doesn't. He doesn't have anything to do with it. It has literally nothing. Like, they had to go back 18 years to find something that was affiliated with a camp that was affiliated with a church that he was involved in. And she's very concerned about the questions it's raising. That's not strong. That's not strong at all. So anyway, but I want to read one more.
It does. Yeah, it's not strong. It doesn't need to be strong. Fox News had the computer repairman who turned in Hunter Biden's laptop on their show. And the guy, not even reportedly, I'm just describing him, looks like the Scottish guy he's dressed like Scotty from Spaceballs, like the full on tam. It's all like with the little thing. It's like a Scottish beret with a bob on the top. He's wearing a turtleneck up to here and a giant it's a olive green hat, olive green. Like, he looks insane. And they are like, here to completely convey reality is a guy who seems completely detached from it. Go ahead, sir. It doesn't need to be the most grounded, awesome attack. But yeah, it's not that strong. And they're gonna, something going for Warnock is like, the word church is in there. Yeah, it's a church. He's a reverend. He's a man of God.
Yeah, and they have to turn that into a negative while pretending always that would be some sort of positive, and in fact trying to use the fact that, Amy Coney Barrett isn't even like a religious leader. She just is of a religion that's supposed to entirely shield her from criticism. With him, they've had to try to turn his church service into the entire narrative of the election. Yeah. But anyway, one final note on the polling, and I don't know how much more polling we're likely to get for Georgia. There's less than a week to go. This is a note from Survey USA. Georgia is a hot mess, and no opinion pollster could possibly say what will happen when votes are counted in 2 weeks, which is an interesting statement from a pollster operating in Georgia, but apparently it is difficult. Now, I will say that the general election polls in Georgia were pretty accurate leading up to the general election. I know that our takeaway from the election is that all the polls are absolute garbage. Sure, in some cases they might have been. It was pretty accurate in Georgia, actually. And also, as of right now at least, and I believe today is the last day of early voting, but if you live in Georgia, do not listen to me. Find out if you can still vote. The turnout already has been 2.56 million early voters, which breaks the previous record of about almost 500,000 less back in 2008. So it is going to be lower turnout than the general election, but it's higher than any other runoff election that we've had so far, which doesn't seem like it'd be a bad thing for the Democrats.
Seems like it still benefits the Republicans. A spike in turnout.
It might.
Because usually the Republicans win the hell out of Georgia. And the reason that they lost Georgia in the general election is because way more people came out because they wanted Trump out of office. It is a quantum leap, is a huge leap in political knowledge and engagement to vote in a Senate runoff. And those folks are typically more toward, folks are typically more toward ideological polls. And yes, there's more Democrats who are engaged than Republicans who are saying that they're going to vote because of the stats we said earlier. So we'll see how it bears out. I agree, it's a hot mess. I still think that the Republicans are going to win, but I am hoping to be proven wrong.
I hope, as always, that you are proven wrong. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.